Okay.
Well, the real estate still going up according to my pals that are in the business. We did good. We did.
Okay, let's share the page. And we're going to be learning a Gemara in honor of the holiday of obviously Shavuos, which Shavuos is one of the things that happened on Shavuos is the passing of David HaMelech. The King David passes away on Shavuos. We know that the word miyad is to represent Moshe, Yisrael, David. So the Baal Shem Tov passes away on Shavuos, and David HaMelech passed away on Shavuos. That's the Gemara tells us David Batzeres, he passes away on Shavuos. So we're going to learn a little bit about David HaMelech, and an interesting piece. There's so many Gemaras to talk about David. So, but just before we start, so we have a little background of the story. This is not, I'm just going to read this one. It's a custom that we actually, some have, and Chabad is one of them, which is to learn the Talmud of Sota, which has 49 pages, because we start with the second page, that is dealing with, that deals with the laws of the Sota. And in there, we have about, this is where I find it, yeah. We learn about, at the end of Sota, in page 42, we study its laws of how the Jewish people went to war. So we all know that in Parshas Kiseitze, we learn about there was a Moshe Muhammad, the person who was anointed, that he would put your phone on stop. He would please. He would get the army ready for war. So in the laws of the war, it talks about different wars the Jewish people had, and it discusses the war the famous war that the Jewish people had in the area of Beit Shemesh, which was the battle of King Saul when he faced Goliath. Goliath, everyone knows, Goliath is the giant of a man who was the warrior for the Philistines. They lived what today is known as the Aza area. That was the Philistines was a little bit, maybe they had a little bit more north of what today I think could have been as far as Ashdod, Ashkelon. Yeah, I think the remains of the buildings that were destroyed by Shimshon, by Samson, was in I think there's a gas on. No? Huh? There's a gas running. Okay. Yeah. So there was I think it was in the area. I think they found it near Ashkelon. But either way, kind of that area is what the Philistines was, and so that was David's first interaction with major war. He goes and he beats Goliath. Everyone knows the story, and he becomes the son-in-law of Saul, and then he becomes the army general, etc. So the Gemara that talks about, and also connected a bit to Shavuos, about who is Goliath. Who is he? So we know Goliath is no stranger to the Jewish people, and he's definitely no stranger to King David. Why? Because again, in Shavuos, the custom some people have is that we read the book of Ruth, and the book of Ruth is the story of Naomi, who her husband and her leave Eretz Yisrael in the time of famine. They were from the tribe of Yehuda. They go to Moab. They integrate into the society over there. Their two sons marry the two daughters of the prince of Moab. They have Ruth and Orpah. So Ruth and Orpah become the daughter-in-laws of Naomi and her husband. I think his name was Elimelech. No, Boaz comes later. Elimelech, his name was, I think, right? In the story of Ruth. And she goes, her husband dies, her two sons dies, and she's alone. She's left, she has nothing. She goes back with her two daughters to Eretz Yisrael. On her way back to Eretz Yisrael, one daughter-in-law says, she tells her daughter-in-law to go back. This is my trip. This is my journey. It's my people. You know, we're very close, but you could go back. You don't have to go through the difficulties I'm going to go through now. She's going to go through hard times. Ruth stays. She says, no, wherever you go, I go. And Orpah goes back. She cries. The Talmud tells us from the verses we learned, she has 4 tears. For the 4 tears that she cries for leaving Naomi, she has 4 giants of sons. One of them is Goliath, and we know that's the one that they're talking about in the Gemara Sota, who fights later the Jewish people. And the other one is Yishbi. There's another 2 sons. All giants, all later dealt with by King David. Goliath is initially dealt with, but David and these are all David's cousins. Why? Because these are Orpah's children, so they're related to David. There's some relationship there, Ruth and etc. Now Orpah becomes what's fascinating about Orpah. The Gemara tells us. I'm not going to go into detail. Not so important, but Orpah becomes really she goes to totally other extreme. From being a pious woman in the house of Naomi, she comes she has relations with almost everyone in the Philistines. No one even knows who her children's fathers are. Goliath is possibly from many husbands or many men. So she becomes a total opposite, and she becomes a hateful person, and she has a resentful person. She hates David, she hates the Jewish people, etc. So here, that brings us to our story in Sanhedrin. We may go back to tap into this Gemara in Sota again. So before we go to the Gemara, let's look at the Navi. Okay, so this is Samuel 2. I think what's the verse here? It's verse 21. So we learn about the beginning of the chapter talks about the revenge the Gibeonim have against Saul's family. David is best friends with Yonatan, and Yonatan asks him to spare his child, but the rest of the family of David were all murdered by the Gibeonim and handed over by David because Saul was allowed for the Gibeonim to have to be tormented by the Jewish people, and they wanted revenge. And there was a famine, and David figured that the famine was a result of mistreating the Gibeonim. After that, the Gemara the pasuk in pasuk Zion, it says like this. I think it's Zion. Let me see if it's pasuk Tes Vav. It says, "Vatihi oid mechamel aplishtim es Yisrael vayered David avadav imay veilachmu but as plishtim vayoav David." And so David becomes tired because he's fighting the Philistines the whole time as a revenge for what the Philistines do to Saul. Then the pasuk in Tes Zayin continues 16. The Yishbi Benov asher bilidei harapa umishkal keinai shosh meis miskal nachayshes uchager chadasha ve'em lakas is David. So it says like this. The pasuk says, and Yishbi, who is from the sons of Harpa, he's called Yishbi Benov. The Gemara is going to tell us why is he called Yishbi Benov. He's the son of Rapha, and he has this huge armor of copper, and he comes to fight David. He wants to kill David. Okay, so now let's go to the Talmud and see what the Gemara is going to tell us what the story is all about. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara quotes, "V'Yishbi Benov bildei harafa." So Yishbi, who is from the sons of the giants of Harapa, and he's from the city of No, seemingly. Umishkal keinai shloish meis mishkal nachayshes, and the weight of his spear was 300 shekel of brass. Obviously, he's a giant of a man, and he has a very large weapon to fight. Uchager chadasha, and he says, and this Gemara can be learned in many ways. There's the simple, just a story. And there's a lot of people who study this piece of Gemara. One of those who I listened to a class from many years ago, taught this Gemara more than once, was who took this entire story on a political view of the current situation of the Jews of Eretz Yisrael and the Palestinians. So we're talking about so that's his view, but we'll go a little bit according because he has some ideas. So here he has Yishbi he has this great armament, V'chodra Chadasha, and he has a new armor. He wants to kill David, King David. What's this? So the Gemara says, "My Yishbi Benov." What's the story? Why is he called Yishbi Benov? Right away, the question is also, if he wants to say that Yishbi is from the city of Nov, he should have said Yishbi Minov, the mem first, not Benov. Seems almost as if his name is Benov. Now, where's the city of Nov? A little history. This is the story. Nov, we don't know exactly where Nov is, but I asked a few people. Nov could be either what's today known as Ramat Shlomo, or others think it's maybe Givat Zapartit, north there. What was the city of Nov? The city of Nov was in the times of Saul, the city of the Kohanim, the priests. David is running away from Saul, and he comes to the city of the Kohanim, the priests, which is again either Ramat Shlomo or Har Sufim. The reason why they think it's there is because they never found graves in those two places, which means that they would assume that that's a city of priests, because they wouldn't bury people in a city of priests, so the priests could stay pure. I don't know if there's any accuracy to that idea of that's where Nov is, but that's the best I got. So the David hides in Nov. Now, according to some opinions, and that's where our story comes in, David is not 100%, not to say he's not truthful, but he doesn't inform the Kohanim, Achimelech, and his son, why he's there. He doesn't say that he's running away from Saul wants to kill him. So they give him armaments and they give him food. They give him the sword of Goliath. So this sword that David used to cut off Goliath's head, it was kept by the priests. They give it to David, and David runs away. In that whole situation, one of the horrible peoples of our history, his name is Doeg Adami. Doeg Adami was a very conniving, he was a very learned person. The Gemara tells us earlier that he was a big Talmud Chacham, but he was a big Baal Lashon Hara. He's one of the people who don't have a portion in the world to come. He's on a very short list. He goes and he reports back to Saul what happens. Saul sends back Doeg, and he wipes out the entire city of Kohanim. He murders the entire city. Because he causes this jealousy for that Saul has for David. So now that we know before that Doeg was also constantly making trouble. So here it says, Vayom al Hakas of Ma Yishbi Benov. Rabbi Yehuda Marav. So the Rabbi Yehuda Marav says like this. Ish Shaboy al Iskei. The story of Yishbi is that God wanted to make right the story of Noah. Now seemingly David did nothing. David is just running away from Saul. Saul kills the people of Noah. Doeg kills the Kohanim of Noah. But David's part of the story. Many times we learn from this that even if you're innocent, but if you're part of the story, you're part of the story and you have to answer for it, even though David didn't do anything. He's just running away. Like I said, some people say that he wasn't 100% full of information about why he needed the sword and why he was hungry. So, Aliske Noib, Omer Lech David. God speaks directly to David, which is by the way, a very interesting concept. We find both by David and Saul and Shlomo. We don't find this by Saul. We find Saul prophesied, but this open line of communication between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, between God and David, is amazing, because David has a team of prophets. He has, Nasan Navi and Gad Navi. It's not like he's lacking prophets to be his, but those were political prophets. But there is a personal relationship that both King David, and Shlomo have with Hashem. So God directly talks to David, and he says like this: he says that until when will this sin be concealed in your hand? You are involved in the story of why all the Kohanim were murdered in Nob. You have to account for it. Because of you, the city of Nob, the city of Kohanim, was destroyed. And now he blames also, this is even more extreme. The fact that he wasn't 100% truthful or not full of information in the city of Nob is one thing. But here, Doeg was a horrible person. The Gemara literally says Doeg was a horrible person, a person that doesn't have a portion of the world to come. But God still says, you brought out the worst of Doeg. And banished. Doeg was banished from the world to come because of you. And because of you, Saul and his 3 sons were killed. Why? Because Saul was punished for the city of Nob. So God now this is towards the beginning of David's rule. He says to David, you have to answer for your involvement in the city of No. What is the choices God gives him? God gives him choices. So Rashi's Reb Steinzalt says it should have been written the Yishbi from No. The fact that it says Yishbi No means to tell us that it's a story of No. So God gives him a choice. What is God's choice for him? He says like this: Retzoncha yichlu zaracha. You could either choose that your children, your descendants will be destroyed, will cease to exist. That your children will pay for your sin. Or you yourself will be given over to the enemy. So David has a choice now. He has to decide: is he himself going to be given over to the enemy, or are the Jews going to, or his descendants going to suffer for his sins? Now, again, this is David HaMelech. David HaMelech doesn't have the opportunity, really, to make private decisions. David HaMelech was told by Shmuel that that all the prophecies of royalty and kingship for the Klal Yisrael was for David, right? He's anointed as the king. He can't just decide on his own about him and his children. He has to make also political, other considerations he has to consider, halachic considerations, the future of the Jewish people, the future of the house of David. He has a lot of things that he has to consider. We don't see over here that he consults with anyone. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but the Talmud doesn't tell us that he does. But he makes a decision. He takes it upon himself.
What is zaracha?
Your children.
Oh,
Retzoncha yichlu zaracha. Zaracha, your children, David's children.
okay.
That God's giving him either that David's children are going to be annihilated, or you're going to be given over to the enemy. You have to choose. What?
It seems like
What would be the obvious answer?
it's not focused on the seven.
Yeah,
The test for him.
no, this doesn't seem like it's a test. This doesn't seem like it's a test. It seems like this is a question. And I think the question really is, and he wasn't yet, I don't know if it would be way too early for him to have walked away from his role as being David HaMelech. Like, this is early. This is Solomon's not born yet. This before the story of Bathsheba, seemingly. There's a lot for him to consider. Like, imagine you just get into the job after you promise that you are the guy. You're not. It's not so. And throughout, it's early into his role, and he has to make this hard decision. It's interesting that God comes to him so early in this role. And it's a good question about if it's a test or if it's a legitimate question. We're going to find, if we get to the next piece of Talmud we want to learn, we're going to find that the similar is in the story of Bathsheba. That when Bathsheba, what happens is, Bathsheba, David kind of brought upon himself the story of Bathsheba. We're going to learn that, but David is he wants to be, mentioned in the big boys. The Merkava is the chariot is 4. So there's different opinions who are the 4. It's definitely Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, or it's Rachel. That's why the month of Iyar is Aleph, Yud, Yud, Reish, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel. But there's other opinions that David's part of the Merkava. So David says, why did we say in the morning prayers or in the daily prayers, Elekei Avram, Elekei Yitzchak, Elekei Yaakov, God, the Lord of David, the Lord of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? Why don't we say the Lord of David? So God says, you don't just get to be on that list. You have to be tested. You can't just get here. You have to be tested. So he says, okay, test me. So the Gemara says, from this we're never asked to be tested. The God says, you know what? I'll test you. Not only that, I'm going to give you I'm going to make it easier for you. I'm going to even tell you what I'm going to test you on, so you could be concerned. You could watch out. I didn't tell them what I tested them on, but I'll make it easier for you. We'll do it. That you're from the younger generation. We're going to make it easier for you to get on the list. Affirmative action. So he says he gets tested with Bathsheba, and he doesn't make the test. Okay. So he says, so David chooses mutar emsar biyad oyev lo yichal zari. He says that you said. He goes, I my descendants have to keep on existing. I will be given over to the enemy, not my children. Again, David HaMelech has to make a decision on it's there's a lot of time when you hear a message like that from God, you have a conversation from God. Imagine the next morning you have to get up, and you can't just give up. You get up the next morning and you're still King David. Like, God has to do what he has to do, and you have to do what you have to do. You're never told not to be king. You're never told to to write a will or to, start making plans for the afterlife. God just said, whatever, it's going to happen when it happens. And then it happens. Yom Echad, one day, Nifak liskor bezai. It says he went to hunt with a falcon by the bezai. So he went to go hunt with a falcon. We know till today, like Rabbi Steinzas is going to say soon, in the Arabian desert, they're still using the falcons to help hunt. Now, I don't know clearly what it means by David hunting, because we find actually both in this story and Bathsheba that he was a hunter. Now shooting a bow and arrow at an animal is not kosher. You can't eat the food. So it almost seems like this he had a sport in hunting, which is also a little questionable. How's that go with Jewish law to just hunt for sport? Maybe he would to feed his animals with it, but either way. So Yom Echad did Nopik Liskor B'zai. He went with his falcons. Asa Satan Vidamile Ketavia. Satan came and appeared to him as a deer. Oh, so now he's hunting. Psak Be Geira V'lemati. He shot an arrow at the deer. Now again, see, shooting an arrow at the deer, it depends. Unless he would trip him up in a way that wouldn't make him a treifa. But shooting an arrow at the deer wouldn't permit him to eat the deer. It's not hunting for food, because then it's not kosher. It's not shchita. It's a nevela, right? So
part of his nature.
But see, that's a little bit of the story. The little of the story is that I heard someone was saying about David Melech Yisrael Chavekayim that someone says, I'm not sure the makar of it, that the difference between David and Moshe Rabbeinu, why does Mashiach come from David, not from Moshe, is because of these qualities in David Melech. Means because the David Melech has, like we said, who does he come from? He comes from Ruth. He comes from Moab. And there's a certain, not in a bad way, but there's certain qualities from the people of Moab that, maybe this is the hunting, this is the aggressiveness. David is the ultimate, King David is the ultimate person. He's the ultimate servant. David Avdi serves, he sets up the tent of tshuva. I mean, he is, but he lives the full life. He goes through the ups and downs of life. Even the story of Bathsheba, also, evidently Satan knew what trips him up. So it was always hunting. He always got tripped up by hunting. So he gets tripped up with this Yishbi with hunting, and also Bathsheba. David was trying very hard to be protected. That God told him he's going to be tested with a woman, so he's very protected. He did all kinds of things that he shouldn't be vulnerable to this. And so he was standing on his roof, and everyone knows the story. He stands on his roof. He sees Bathsheba, but how does he see Bathsheba from his roof? She's hiding behind a beehive, and so she's protected behind the beehive to get ready for the mikvah. So again, Satan comes as a bird, and the first thing David does is he whips out his bow and arrow, and he wants to shoot the bird. And he shoots the bird, and of course it's not the bird. He hits the beehive, and the beehive explodes, and there's Bathsheba, and then the rest is history. Then comes Solomon. So Yom Echad. So Asa Satan Vidamile Ketavia. Satan comes and he appears as a deer. Takbe Gira V'lematis. So David Ryder grabs his arrow, his spear, and he tries to kill the deer, and he can't get him. But now he becomes obsessed with this deer. He needs to catch it. So where David was at the time, we don't know. But he wasn't I don't believe at that time he was yet in Jerusalem. But he chases the deer until he gets to the Philistines. Again, he's on his own. And we're going to see what's interesting is that what day of the week is this? This is Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon. David HaMelech is with his bow and arrow. Yishbi Benov, and all of a sudden, he comes to the Philistines, and he's not careful. He's on his own. David has a history with the Philistines. He should have been more careful. He was a little careless, and he's running on his own with his bow and arrow to hunt with his falcon, and he ends up by the Philistines, and these are his sworn enemies. And again, he has Mishpacha there. He has Orpah there. It's complicated. And he has Goliath, his cousin that he killed, and he has, all of a sudden, who sees him? Yishbi. Yishbi is another son of Orpah. So that's why the pasuk says that if you go back a second in the verse, it says Bilidei Haropa. In the Gemara in Saita, the Gemara asks, Why is she called Harafa? Why is she called Orpa? She has different names, but this is the same person. So he's Yishbi. Omar, he says, when he sees David, he identifies him. Says, Hainu Hai Dekatli Legasi Achi. He's the one who killed my brother Goliath. David kills Goliath. So now he wants revenge. And we just said he had this huge spear and he has this armament. He's a strong person. He's a giant of a person. Kapte Kamate. So what does he do? He binds up David, doubles him over, and he places him under the olive press. So he wants to crush David, King David. Now, in some of the people who use this Gemara as kind of aligning it with political times, which means basically it doesn't have to be only pressure, physical pressure, but also pressuring David. David's now in a situation where he's vulnerable to the Philistines. They have full control. Yishbi has full control of him, and he wants to crush him. Now, David knows that some way or another, God didn't tell maybe exactly how he's going to die, but he knows that he made the choice of death over his children. So, nevertheless, God doesn't give up on David. It's Abid B'lei Nisa. He makes a miracle for David, and Mochalei Ara Mitoisei, the sand becomes soft. So the press is there, but he's being pressed into soft sand. So he's not. Rash says either he's pressed into soft sand, or this becomes like a hill that kind of. But either way, he's not Yishbi with all his weight, and he's this giant of a person. Can't now in the Gemara in Sota says that I don't know which brothers were bigger, but Goliath was the giant and the warrior, and he was. Again, the reasons that Goliath was spoke against God, spoke against the Jewish people. I mean, he was a very brazen chutzpah person, but he wasn't the greatest of his brothers. Of his brothers, could be Yishbi was a bigger person than him. So he wants to take revenge for his brother Goliath, and he wants to do it against David HaMelech. So the ground comes soft. So we already know that God doesn't want to actualize the punishment, because he could have killed him right then and there. He could have crushed him. That would have been the end of the story. But God makes a miracle. Now, so what is the obvious question? Why does he make such a light miracle? He could have just saved him. Like, he was set up. Why does, if he's making the miracle, so obviously Hashem wants, it seems like from the end of the story, and I think I'm going to open up afterwards, I want everyone to share what they feel, because I think the story is a lot more than just meets the eye. I think Hashem wanted David to change his mind. He didn't like his decision. God didn't like what David said. He didn't like his choice. So he makes a miracle and the ground softens. And therefore, David talks about this experience in Tehillim 18. He says, Tarchiv tzadi tachtoi, you have enlarged my steps beneath me. Loi mo'adu karsulai, that my feet did not slip, meaning that God protected him, brought in the space that he shouldn't be crushed by Yishbi under the press. Okay, so let's Steinsaltz tells us hunting method was widespread since the ancient times. Falcons is still popular sport today worldwide, including in Middle Eastern cultures. From the Middle Persia hunting, and so the idea of liskar bezai, they're missing half of the message here. Okay, he doubled him over. The meaning is that he placed him in a garment and wrapped him in it, and then tried to crush him. Now here, Rabbi Steinsaltz wants to tell us something which is interesting. He says about Satan, that Satan, you have to separate the Christian or other religions that talk about Satan and the Jewish view of Satan. He says the Bible and the rabbinic literatures, the figure of Satan is the persecuting angel whose name means adversary. Satan means to be an adversary. Therefore, his title is more accurate as the Satan, because he's in the incident related here, his role is that of an emissary of God. In one of Zechariah's versions, the prophet sees the Satan charging Yeshua, the high priest, with unspecified accusations. The Satan's evil image stems primarily from his role in the opening sequence to the book of Job. In the preface to the book, in the discussion of the essence of suffering, the Satan alleges that Job is virtuous only because God has bestowed his what's his word? One offense upon him. God grants Satan permission to rob Job's possessions, Okay, but Rav Steinzal says the idea of Job, of Satan taking souls and all that, that's not a Jewish thing. But Satan is a messenger of God, and here he becomes the messenger of God to trick David to run to the Philistines. Again, Satan, in both cases, Satan only sets up the David. He doesn't force David. David reacts to Satan, like he chases the deer or he shoots the beehive. So Satan knows David's weaknesses, but he doesn't. The actions are David's alone. Okay. So now David is trapped under the press. The ground is softer, but he's still trapped. He's still a hostage of Yishbi. So he says, what day was this that David was taken? Was the day at dusk of the eve of Shabbos, meaning Friday afternoon. Now, David, we all know David has loyal soldiers and generals. The main ones are his nephews, Yoav ben Tzruya and Avishai ben Tzruya. Now, Yoav ben Tzruya is the one who gets most of the attention. Yoav, who fights along David, who is he's whether he's older and younger than David, we don't know. He seems to be younger than David, but he's definitely his nephew, because Tzruya is David's sister. And David has another general who's Avishai, who's Yoav's brother. So Avishai ben Tzruya habekoma chayev reisha ba'arber gabri demaya. Okay, you have to pay attention to everything. The Gemara is telling us stories that seemingly are insignificant details. For instance, that he was hunting with a falcon, or that Satan comes as a deer and he's chasing him. Obviously, in all these things, there's a message here. Why specifically a deer? Why is David chasing deer? Why is he vulnerable to the deer? Why is he vulnerable to hunting? So here but now he's captured, and Avishai, the son of Tzruya, which is his general and one of the head of the army, is washing his hair Erev Shabbos. In the different opinions what this is, but let's just say the general, the simple translation, in 4 jugs of water. So he's using 4 jugs of water to bathe his head, to shampoo himself, to get ready for Shabbos. Then Chazinai Kismei Dama. He sees 4 blood stains into the water. He sees blood in the water. All of a sudden, he's getting ready for Shabbos. So here's Avishai, who's the general. David is on his own. No one knows where David is. No one even knows that he's missing. David wasn't being monitored 24/7. David himself was a warrior. We see after this, things change. But in this point, David's early on. David is on his own. And Avishai is getting ready for Shabbos, like everyone would on Shabbos. And for some reason, he has 4 jugs of water. What's the significance of 4 jugs? I don't know. But in the 4 jugs, he sees blood, which is not supposed to be blood. And he knows that right away there's a sign. The others say he didn't see blood, but asa yoina itrif kamei. A dove comes and starts flattering, banging. Rashi says banging its head, doing all kind of crazy behavior, trying to get Avishai's attention. So Avishai right away realizes something's wrong. Someplace, somewhere, something's wrong. Doesn't know what. Omer, he says like this: Knesset Yisrael yoina imsilya, that the Jewish people are compared to a dove. Like it says, Kanfa yoina nechpa bakesa. So we have a verse to support that the Jewish people are like a dove. Shma mina, from this I know right away that David Malka Yisrael B'tzari Shari, King David's in trouble. Why does he know that King David's in trouble? Because the Jewish people were not in war. So if the dove is panicking, it means a sign that something's wrong with the Jewish people. It can't be the Jewish people as a whole, the way we see it now, because everything seemed okay. He was the guy in charge. He knows everything. He knows if the Jewish people are in danger or not. And as the general of David and the Jewish people, he knows the Jewish people are not in danger. There's nothing that he knows of his spies, of his army, the intelligence that he has to say that something's wrong with the Jewish people. So where's the vulnerability? It has to be David himself. So he sees that something's wrong, that David must be in trouble. Shema Minois, he's clear that David Malki Yisrael B'tzari Shari, King David's in trouble. So where does he go? He goes to the palace. He goes to David's house to see what's going on. Maybe David had a heart attack. I don't know. Maybe David was stuck fell under some sfarim or something. No, something's wrong with David Melch. He comes to his house. He sees David Melch is not there. And Omar, he says, he goes to the base medrash. So here, imagine this. He knows something's wrong. God, he has a supernatural message, either from a pigeon, a dove, or from blood in the water. But he knows something's wrong. So he doesn't panic because he's a person of action, and he's a general. So he knows he's calculated. So he goes first to the base medrash. He goes to the yeshiva, and he says like this: the law is, I'm not allowed to ride the horse of the king. I'm not allowed to sit on his chair. I'm not allowed to use his things. But we're in a dangerous situation. Can I use his means of transportation, his mule? The question, obviously, is what's the question? I mean, is that the only mule? Was that the only, car available in the whole of it? The morning that they started the bombing here in Eretz Yisrael, in this last war. So Shabbos morning. So I walked every Shabbos morning to the mikveh about 5 o'clock in the morning. So I come to the mikveh. I'm walking to the mikveh. I walk by the prime minister's house, and I saw all the engines on of all the cars. All the cars were running. Usually not running, but all the engines were running. So I had a feeling something's about to go down, as if they're ready to just jump into the jeeps and take off. So all the engines were running. So here, I mean, you have plenty of means of. I mean, this is the general. I'm sure he has his own horse, his own thing. So he says he needs to use David's horse. Why? So first of all, it's brought down that for some reason the mule was the fastest means of transportation, easiest way for him to get to where he had to go. And what do we know a mule is? A mule is climb. A mule is actually an animal from a donkey and a horse. And Avishai, being a religious Jew, would not ride on a mule. So why does the king have a mule? And he said, the Gemara asks, the Gemara in Yishalmi says, why does the king have a mule? Because the family of the king is differently. But it's brought down also that the mule that David had was not a mule that was from a union of a donkey and a horse. There were mules that were created in the 6 days of creation. And David had that one. So it was actually not a kalayim, it wasn't a mixed breed. It was a breed that stopped breeding, but it was a breed that David had. Okay, maybe a miraculous mule. So he goes to the base medrash. He asked him, could he ride it? So also shel base medrash, he asked the base medrash, if you're in danger, or there's a danger for the Jewish people, as the general, he knows he can make that call, then it's okay for you to use the mule of David. The question is, obviously, how does he know where to go? Like, he doesn't even know. It wasn't like David was going to some mission. David started off with a curiosity. He goes hunting with his falcon, and then Satan comes as a deer, and he's chasing the deer. So Rachav the day he goes on the mule. Hashem makes a miracle, and the Gemara afterwards says he's one of 3 people. Now God made a miracle that the ground. He jumped space, like Eliezer. We know Eliezer, Abraham's servant, when he went on the mission to get Rivka. Also, he traveled. You know how far he traveled? He traveled from Eretz Yisrael all the way to Macedonia. I mean, that doesn't, camel, that takes a while. He got there the same day because Kifitz Zaderach, he had jumping. So here God again makes a second miracle. So the first miracle that we have is that the ground softens under David. The second miracle is this third miracle. Second miracle is that that he even knows that David's in trouble because either the blood or the dove. Now he runs and he gets Kifitz Zaderach, Gemara says. As he gets into the Philistines, who does he meet? This Orpah. You have to remember, Avishai is also, Avishai ben Tzruya is also David's cousin. So he's also could be related to Orpah. So he sees Orpah sitting outside. And what does she do when she's sitting outside? She is the mother, and who's Orpah? Orpah is the mother of Yishbi, the Hava Novla that she's knitting. So she's pretending to be a nice old woman knitting. You have to remember this is many years later, right? She pretends to be a nice woman. Meantime, she's really a terrorist, like that's Israel's facing all the time, right? The kids and children, kids and children, women and children, but she's in there knitting as if she's being nice. Paske lepilcha shad leshad shadate ilvei. She sees Avishai, and she takes her this the what is it called, the spindle, and she uses it as a dart or as a sword, and she tries to kill Avishai, the son of Surya, to kill him. So she's protecting. She's like officially the old woman sitting there, but she's really protecting that David shouldn't be protected, shouldn't be saved. So and several the mikvah, she wanted to kill him. Amrle, alam asi le pelech. So what does she say to Avishai? She throws it at him and misses. She misses him. Right? He's a soldier, so she misses him. So what does she do? I'll say the idea that the guy says in politics. The rabbi was saying. He says, the terrorists come in the bombers. Then they say, where's the humanitarian help? So she asked for this. She asked for it back. She wants it back. She says, I try to kill you. Okay, I try to kill you, but now you give me food. The reason why we're in war is because we try to murder you. But now there's a blockade. Give us food. You have to help us. So she asked for the spindle back. So what does he do? He gives it back there, but he shoots it back at her and he throws it. It hits her head and he kills her. So he kills Orpah, the city of Ruth, the sister of Ruth, who puts an end to her story. Goliath is dead. Yishbi now has David, but her story's over. Her story's over. This is the story of Ruth comes to end over here, and he kills her. Then he continues. So then he makes his way to Yishbi Benov. He comes to Yishbi Benov. Amre, he says, so Yishbi says, Hashta Beit Rei. Okay, he's now outnumbered. There's David, who's a warrior. Avishai is a warrior. And Yishbi, as strong as he is, he's 2 against 1. Bekotli, they're going to kill me. So Paskali David Le'ela, he decides that he's going to kill David. No more playing around, no more trying to press him with the pressure, with the olive press. He figured, but again, he could have just killed him, but instead he has to be. He goes, never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity, and he throws them up in the air and he puts his sword underneath. He figured that David's going to fall on the sword and he's going to die. So Paskali David Le'ela, he throws him up. Rumach, and he puts his spear underneath. David's going to fall now on the spear and he's going to die in this great Amr Avishai Shem. So Avishai says the name of Hashem, Yudke Vavke, he pronounces the name of the Lord, and David's now stuck in the middle of the air. He's not falling and he's not coming down. David's just up he's up in the air. Ultimately, David Beishmailar. Now David's in between heaven and earth. Okay, so now we have Avishai on one side. Evidently, we don't find that Yishbi tries to fight Avishai. Maybe Yishbi is scared of Avishai. So Yishbi is on one side. Avishai is on the other side. So Avishai is David's general. Yishbi is David's enemy. And David's up in the air. Okay. So now they're having a conversation. So Omrle, he says, Avishai Shem, David Beishmai Lara. So now David is suspended in the earth. So the Gemara asks 1 second. Why didn't David say the name of God? Why does Avishai have to say them? David also knows it. It says, because David is in no place to take care of himself. He's already mentally taken by Avishai. He's not focusing. The rule is that a prisoner cannot release himself. David's the prisoner, not just physically, but he's also in the mindset of a prisoner. And he doesn't see a solution. Avishai is from the outside. He says, 1 second, we don't have to subscribe to Yishbi's abuse and terrorism. We have tools at our hand. The Jewish people have tools. We have God's name. So he says the name of God. Then now he has a conversation with David. He goes, what are you doing here? Why are you here? So he tells him the whole story. He says, this is what God told me. God said that I have to pay for my sins of Noah. And I realized this is how I'm going to pay for it, that Yishbi is going to kill me. This is what I answered. I chose to be killed. So Avishai again has another perspective of everything. He says, what are you doing? What are you talking about? You got to change the deal. You have to tell God that you got to switch it around. I need to live, and whatever you want to do to my children, you do to my children, but this, you're not killing me. So Avishai doesn't subscribe to David's choice. He says, go switch around your prayer. Let your children sell wax. I don't care what happens to your descendants. And what happens to his descendants? By the way, by that choice that he switched, is the destruction of the first temple. the exile of the house of David, the murder of most of the kings, Tzidkiyahu, that's the consequence of this choice. So he says, I don't care what happens to your children. You can't be in this situation. The Jewish people need you now. See, the question is, they like we said before, David has to make a choice. Like, as David is the king and the savior of the Jewish people, he has to see what's the best choice. Abishai sees clarity. And we see clearly he has clarity. He knows how to use Hashem's name. He's focused. He knows how to read the spots of blood. He says, you got to switch around the prayer. This is not what we're doing. So he has a certain level of authority. And so he says, help me. It's not enough. You pray with me. So we have a pasuk that says that Avishai, the son of Sruya, his sister, helps David. Rav Yehuda says, Shazari b'tefillah. They both prayed. Avishai Shem v'achta, and then Avishai said again God's name, and now David fell down. So now David falls back down, but not on the sword. And now we have David and Avishai against Yishbi. So what does he do? He chases them. He still feels he has the upper hand. And they're scared of him. Kimati Kubi, they come to a place called Kubi. Again, what's fascinating about this Gemara, it seems like almost a story you would tell your children to go to sleep. But this is a story about David HaMelech. And it's taking up lines and lines of the Talmud. This is Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah doesn't just write things. There's a lot of stories that happened to David. He lived 70 years. There's many stories, but the Torah tells us this story. The Torah tells us them. The Gemara tells us the detail. This is a pasuk in Tehillim, in Samuel. So they come to the city of Kubi. Amrei Kubi Kumbei. They say that it's not. The name of the city is not favorable for us because he's going to have the upper hand. So they said this is not a place that we're going to be able to beat him. So they continue to run. Kimata Beitre. When they come to the city of Tu, they say betray Guria and Katlu La'aryeh, could two young lion cubs kill a lion, a male lion, alpha lion? No, two lion cubs can't kill an alpha lion, so they can't kill Yishbi. He's too strong for them. Amrlei, so they figured they're going to throw him off guard. He doesn't know that Abishai killed his mother, right? Abishai took the spear, shot it at his mother, killed his mother, and Yishbi is not aware of the situation. So he says, he says, maybe go find your mother, maybe go check out how she's doing in the grave. So when he hears that, when he hears his mother's name, he realizes that they killed her. He gets lost, he gets overwhelmed, he becomes weak. And then David and Avishai jump on him and they kill him. Come on. This is what it means. Gemara tells us, they told David, okay, you know what? From now on, you stay in the palace. You're not going out. No more war. You're retiring your sword. We got this from here. You're adventurous. You're chasing deers. You're getting caught in between heaven and earth. And you're under olive presses. We can't. We have to protect the light of Israel. And so no longer are you going to be out there adventurous. David's days as an adventurer warrior are over. And the boys, Avishai and Yoav and the army have it from here. And that's the end of the piece of Gemara. So, maybe the rabbi wants to give insight. The story seems like a very interesting story. But I think that what we can learn about the story is again about who David HaMelech was that he wasn't a simple person. And there was a lot of complexities about him. There was a lot of he had a lot of good people around him, and he had a responsibility that sometimes he himself maybe wasn't even aware of. Anyone else want to share something, some thoughts on this? Or that's just Rabbi, what do you think?
Well, no one could die before its incidents because German had made a deal.
70.
So all these are trials and tribulations. Well, until 70,
So what was the idea of the story?
tribulations. Well, we know what the happened. We know what the deal was between the German and the and anybody that knew that and reading that story, you know exactly that.
Yeah, but what's the lesson then? What would be the lesson? Like, what was the purpose of the story if he's not going to die anyways?
like the rest of us.
Yeah, sure.
We all have it. So if he did it, he can teach so many jobs to the religion. Maybe we can do it.
Yeah.
Maybe, also the fact that maybe think about, David Amelech, and, he was shifting his role of leadership. And what may have seemed like, what he wanted to do, so his ego got it done. He wanted to kill the deer, he chasing the deer, he wanted to conquer the deer without thinking about what was the implications. He got so focused on what he needed to do.
What he thought he needed to do.
He thought he needed to do. It turns out that there were, and even making the choice between, because I thought, well, it's an obvious choice. He focus on his family, his kids. But it's like, no, actually, in this case, he's David Amelech. His presence was actually more important than where the children. She actually was not making them. There's a lot of levels to making those choices, particularly in a place of leadership, which is really wrapped up and says, you may be a good warrior, you can't go out there.
Can't go there. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Chos of David Amelech, he's buried right here, and like we do say, David. I think to add to your point, that we say David Amelech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, right? We say David lives forever. And it's not just that his descendants live forever. David lives forever. David himself lives forever. And I think that, like you were saying, that this moment, that whatever he needed to still do had to be done. It wasn't enough just that he'd leave descendants. He had to live. He had to live more. He had to live long. Even the most amazing ending of the story, Bathsheba, that whole haftarah that we read in Chaisara. That means like after everything, they have a conversation about David Amelech's future, about who's going to succeed David Amelech. And what does she finish off with after he promises her that Shlomo will be king? She says, David should live forever. I mean, like we're just talking about his death, and she says, why? Because David's life is superior to any kind of future. Number one thing is David has to live. And anything after that is secondary. Beautiful. Right, everyone?
You made mistakes. You made big mistakes. You have to deal with the consequences, but still move on
and he had such good people around him also.
Right. You listen to him.
Listen to him.